Good evening again and welcome. And those of you who have come for the first time, we extend a particularly hearty welcome to you. And we hope that you will consider joining us here at the Buddha Dhamma Mandala Society every Friday night. Usually for the last few weeks on Friday evenings, we have been discussing some of the discourses of the Buddha, but tonight, as it's the first Friday of the month where we have usually a special puja, instead of our usual discussion, I thought tonight I might give a talk about a particular aspect of Buddhism which has just recently occurred to me as being of some interest. I was passing by a school recently and I noticed that the school had a motto, and the motto was written in Latin. It was on the school's crest, and I was intrigued to know what that motto said. And it took me some time, but I eventually found out what it said, and it was a particularly meaningful motto. And for some reason, I then just developed an interest in mottos. And I looked at mottos on some other schools, and then I looked at the motto of the state of Singapore, which is on the coinage, on the state crest. And it occurred to me then that some people or some families have mottos. At some time in their life, they feel that a particular saying or a particular verse or a particular epigram is of particular significance to them. And there's very good reason for this. A motto is an attempt to summarize in very brief terms the aims or the ideals of the individual or the institution that has it. In a simplified and encapsulated form, with a motto, we hope to be able to give a direct sense to a newcomer or an outside observer as to what this individual is interested in, what their aims or ideals are, or what aims or ideals this particular institution aims at. And then I thought, well, are there any mottos that religions have? And I did a bit of reading about it, and I discovered that religions too, at one time or another, different religions have given themselves mottos, or perhaps in this case a better term would be an epitome, a small phrase or sentence, or once again an epigram, which encapsulates what that religion is all about. And of course, the first one that I thought of was the motto or the epitome of Islam. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. 5 times a day, in perhaps thousands or hundreds of thousands of mosques all around the world, this epigram is sung or chanted. I believe that many Muslims have this written in very beautiful Arabic calligraphy in their homes. It summarizes what this particular religion is all about. The most important, the most central themes of that particular religion. A very suitable motto. And then I thought that other great world religion, Christianity. Now I've been speaking with, or more usually spoken to, by Christians from time to time, and I tried to remember, are there any phrases or sentences or anything that they've used to help me to understand the central teachings of their philosophy? And I thought of a few, and eventually I settled on one which I don't think it is an official motto for the Christian faith, But certainly it is a very popular one, it's very widely used, and if you look at, once again, it sums up the most fundamental, the most profound, if you like, the most unique teachings of Christianity. It's from John 3:16, and probably some of you may have been had this recited to you by Christian friends from time to time. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. Now I'd like to stress that, to the best of my knowledge, this is not an official motto, but certainly it's a very popular saying, it's a very beautiful saying, and it fairly well summarizes some of the unique aspects of the Christian faith. So then I had to move on. What about that most beautiful of religions, Taoism? What's their motto? And I thought, now how could Taoism have a motto? The first line in the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that can be spoken of is not the Tao. So Taoism's motto would have to be, I suppose, either silence, or perhaps more appropriately, a good deep belly laugh or a giggle. Taoism has no motto. All right, what about that other great world religion, Buddhism? What could be the motto or the epitome of the Buddhist religion, of the teachings of the Buddha? And from time to time, the Buddha actually tried to summarize his teachings for the purposes of clarity, so that people could take that saying, think about it, perhaps teach it to others. And there are, in fact, several. One of them is the famous Yeche Dhamma, that which has a cause the Lord has spoken of, and the stopping of that cause the Lord has also spoken of. In ancient times, this, well, it's actually called Dhamma Pariyaya. This epitome of Dharma used to be written in Sanskrit or Pali, and it used to be stamped on clay tablets, sometimes thousands of clay tablets, and in ancient India they would stack them up and put them inside a stupa. If you go to the museums in India, very, very frequently you will see a statue of the Buddha, and on the throne will be that Dhamma Pariyaya written in Sanskrit. This certainly used to be a very popular epitome of the Buddha's teachings. And there is another one that came to mind once the Buddha's aunt, Mahaprajapati Gautami, asked the Buddha to summarize his teachings. In fact, she actually asked, when you're gone and we have to make decisions ourselves, how are we to know what is and what is not Dharma? And the Buddha's answer may very well be seen as an epitome of the Buddha's teachings. The Buddha said, if it can be seen that this leads to clinging, craving, desire, then it is not my Dharma. If it can be seen that this leads to the giving up, the detachment, to peace, to calming, to higher knowledge, then you can say, this is Dharma. So both of these could be, in a sense, a motto, if you like, of the Buddha's teachings. But of course, neither of these sayings are particularly popular. There is, in fact, in the Dharmapada, which is a collection of some 200 sayings of the Buddha, there is one verse in 4 lines, which is very popularly recognized as an epitome, or if you like, a motto of the Buddha's teachings. And this is that saying, Sabba papassa akaranam, kusalasa upasampada, sachitta pariyodapanam, etang buddhanusasanam. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, purify the mind. This is the teaching of all Buddhas. Now, once again, Buddhism, like Christianity, doesn't have an official and a formal, a copyrighted motto. But so well does this epitomize the Buddha's teachings, so popular, so well known, and incidentally, I would say, in the original Pali, also so easy to remember, so attractive to recite and easy to remember, that we could very well say that this is the unofficial motto for Buddhism. Samba papasa akaranang kusalasa upasampada sacitta pariyudapanang etang buddhana sasanang. It's even, you might even say, it's almost like a jingle, a catchy saying. But of course it's more than that. Let's have a look at it. If you look at it, you see that it's actually making three statements. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. That's the first one. Purify the mind. That's the second one. And the third one is, this is taught by all Buddhas. That's the third one. Now, this is a rather interesting thing when you think about it. Cease to do evil and learn to do good. So, firstly, we're talking about the body and the body's behavior. Okay? The second one, cleanse the mind. We're talking about the mind. So these first two statements are about the body and the mind, or, if you like, about the individual, you and me. We are made up of body and of mind. Now, if you look at the first and the second sentence, cease to do evil and learn to do good. Now, before you can practice that, you have to know something. This statement, or this request, or if you like, this advice, it presupposes something. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. Now, one straight away has to ask, what is evil and what is good? Now, when we think about this, of course, quite often we make very rash judgments. Certain things to us, we're not really quite sure why, but this is the right way to behave and that is the wrong way to behave, and we generally go through life attempting to behave in the right way, at least as often as we can, and to avoid acting in the wrong way. But I don't know whether you've ever been around this type of person. If you've been around me a little bit, you might have had this experience. Every now and then you're acting in the right way, and somebody comes along and says, is that the right way to act? And you say, well, yes. Or you've decided not to do something that somebody has requested you to do, and you say, and they say to you, why don't you want to do it? And you'll say, well, because it's wrong. And then this very irritating, this very annoying person says, why? Why is that right? Why is that wrong? And then suddenly you're shaken out of your complacency. You are challenged to reassess what you've always assumed. And these very irritating people force you to think. And you may have actually never really thought why that is right or why that is wrong. And to be perfectly honest, I am particularly suspicious of religions or philosophies or people who have a very clear and precise idea of what is right and what is wrong. Okay? Why? Because every single moment of your life throws up to you some sort of situation which is slightly different from the framework of right and wrong that you've always assumed. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, there is no absolute right or absolute wrong, simply because there is no God. Now, in the beginning, this appears to be a bit of a problem. those who believe in a supreme being, it appears that they've got a certain advantage. We don't have to think too much. We simply have to look at the sacred scriptures, and the sacred scriptures make it very clear. This is right and that's wrong. Why? God said so. Now that's pretty good authority. I mean, if I say so, that's not bad authority. If the Secretary General of the United Nations says so, well, that's pretty good too. But if God said so, well, there's no discussion needed anymore. If he says it's wrong, it's wrong. End of discussion. Now, if you are a member of, say, the Buddhist tradition, or the Taoist tradition, or the Jain tradition, or perhaps even the Confucian tradition, and you do not accept the idea of a supreme God, you're stuck with a bit of a problem. How do you decide what is right and what is wrong? Now, different attempts have been made to develop a criteria of judgment for right and wrong, for moral behavior. And I don't think anybody has ever worked out the perfect one. Now, those who believe in a God, they say, well, we've got a perfect one. God says that, say, killing is wrong. End of discussion. And for the most part, of course, I would agree. There's little discussion is needed. Killing is wrong. But then you always get, sooner or later, those incidents of which you're not sure. Obviously enough, here's a fellow with a leather jacket and he's got half his head shaved and the other half of his hair is pink. He's got a razor blade in one ear and a safety pin in the other, and he's walking around with a bicycle chain, and he comes up to an old lady and starts to beat her up to try to kill her. Well, there's no discussion really necessary here. This is wrong. Okay? But what about where we get to the state where, let's take this. Somebody is lying in a hospital. They're chronically ill. In fact, they are terminally ill. They have a great tumor or a cyst or some hideous disease which is going to kill them very soon. In the meantime, they're going to suffer tremendous pain. And you're the doctor or the nurse or a friend perhaps, or perhaps even a member of the family. And that person says, look, I've reconciled myself to the fact that in 2 weeks I'm going to be dead. Please, put me out of my misery. Kill me. I'm going to die anyway. And you will be doing the right thing. You will be doing a kind thing. You'll be saving me from 2 weeks of completely unnecessary pain. And this is where the absolute idea of right and wrong, of good and bad, breaks down. Perhaps in a case like this, it may be right. Now, life often throws up for us grey areas in morality, where it's sometimes very difficult to know, is this right or is that wrong? Where our very neat categories of right and wrong break down. Some time ago, I read an interesting case. It is not the first time it's happened. It is similar circumstances have happened like this from time to time, where the situation is such that one or several people are killed or sometimes allow themselves to die for the sake of a group. I read a story recently about a man. He was a Jewish, and during the Second World War he was hiding from the Nazis with a group of people, some 15 or 20 people, and they were hiding under the floorboards of the house. The Gestapo, the secret police, had come to get them, and there was no doubt that they'd have all been killed if they'd have been caught. And this man, the Nazis were on the floorboards above them. They could hear the jackboots on the floor. And this man's baby began to cry. And so he suffocated the baby. His own child. Not an easy decision to make. But on the spur of the moment, he decided that it would be better to sacrifice that one life than have everybody die. Once again, the ship goes down, 30 people crowd into a lifeboat, water is full of sharks, the ship wasn't able to send a message for help before it went down, you're all in the lifeboat, The lifeboat is absolutely full. The edge of the boat is only a few inches from the surface of the water. And then over on the horizon, you can see a storm is coming. Now, unless you're able to take some people out of that boat, it's going to go down and everybody's going to die. So what do? Your very precise and your neat categories of right and wrong perhaps are not going to help you very much anymore. Are you going to be inflexible and say, I don't care what you say, I don't care about practicalities, the sacred book says don't kill, that's it? What are you going to do? Buddhism does not have any absolute, in fact no absolutes at all except nirvana. No absolute right and wrong. In fact, in the teachings of the Buddha we use 3 principles. And although these principles may not be perfect, and in fact, indeed, cannot be perfect, because we live in an imperfect world, they are a good guide, perhaps the best guide around, along with our own conscience, as to how to act in any situation. The first principle is called the instrumental principle. If something helps me to attain my ideal, my aim, or my goal, I can call it good. In other words, nothing has a value, an intrinsic value. It derives its value from its usefulness. Okay? So, before we can use this principle, we have to be very clear about what my goals in life are. Now, many people have never really thought about this. What's your aim in life? Oh, I don't know, to get a hole-in-one on the Singapore golf course, or to make $1 million before I'm 40, or to be like Don Juan or something and have 400 lovers by the time I'm 35, or... Okay. My favorite is, I was reading in a magazine that I found in a doctor's office. It's the magazine of some company. It's called Amways. Okay. This could only happen in America. And this company is a company that sells all soap and other stuff like that. And they have a very hierarchical system. And if you sell, 400 blocks of soap, then you're given a sort of a little plastic badge. And if you sell 800 blocks of soap, well, then you get a tin badge. And in this magazine, it was mentioning that certain people from around the world who had made millions of dollars for their company and a few $1,000s for themselves were being rewarded, oh joy of joys, oh foolish heart, be still. They were being rewarded by actually having the incredible honor of meeting and having lunch with the president of the company. Well, now I can die in peace. The aim of my life has been fulfilled. Sad but true that these are the sort of things that some people have as their aim in life. However, each of us have to pick our own aim. Sometimes people ask the Buddhist, what is the aim of life? Life doesn't have an aim, fortunately. Life has no purpose, fortunately. But a combination of a clean slate and a human intelligence means that we can give life a meaning. And indeed we can. Some people give their life a very mediocre aim, a very mediocre goal. A Buddhist is somebody who has given a very specific meaning to their life. The meaning of my life, or the purpose of my life, is to develop wisdom and compassion to the degree which cannot be bettered. In short, it is to become a whole, a complete human being, or if you like, a Buddha. So, the Buddha attained this aim, and a Buddhist is somebody who takes that aim as their own. I wish to become a Buddha. In this life, in the next, and for how many lives it takes, that will be my goal. That will be my aim, my aspiration. Now the Buddha tells me that to do that, my mind has to be developed in certain ways. For example, greed and hatred and delusion. These are the very antithesis of freedom of mind. So anything that helps to develop, strengthen, or reinforce greed, hatred and delusion, that is taking me away from my goal. Anything that encourages generosity or detachment, love or understanding, okay, that takes me a little closer towards my goal. So I look at my behavior, my thoughts, my speech, my action. If they reinforce generosity or detachment, love and understanding, I will call that good. Any behavior that helps me attain my goal is good. So that's the first principle, the instrumental principle. The second principle is called the consequential principle. We assume that stealing is wrong. But why? I asked this to a group of students today. I was giving a talk. I asked some students today, and they could all tell me that stealing was wrong. And then I was in a very irritating and annoying manner, I said, why? Never thought about that before. And eventually, I got a very Singaporean answer. Okay? Because I'll be punished if I do it. Okay? Not bad. That's a good reason. The problem with that, of course, is sometimes you can get punished for doing good things. However, there is some truth in this. Not so much punishment, but consequences. Everything I do has a consequence. It's like dropping a stone in a pool. The stone won't just break through the surface of the water and sink. When it breaks through the surface of the water, it makes waves. In fact, it makes many, many waves. Okay? And it's like that with our thoughts, speech, and our action. Every time we think, speak, and act, it has an effect. Now, you'll have noticed, or I don't know if you have noticed, but causes and effects, there is a very close relationship between them. Okay? You might say that the cause is the mother of the effect. It's true in nature as it is in psychology. So, for example, it's never been known to happen that a cow gets pregnant and gives birth to a pig. It doesn't happen. It's never been known that a donkey gets pregnant and gives birth to a snake. Why? Because there's always a relationship between the cause and the effect. Cows give birth to cows. Horses give birth to horses. Okay? Although with in vitro fertilization and all of these things today, this may not count very much in the future. But for the time being, and for the most part, there is a predictable relationship between cause and effect. And good actions tend to have a good effect. Good in the sense of it creates ease, harmony in the individual. Bad actions tend to have a negative effect in the sense of pain, distress, suffering, anxiety. So sometimes I'm not really sure whether this behavior may be good or bad, but when I look at the consequences of that behavior, I get a better idea. If I look at the consequences of my action, or the possible consequences, this gives me an indication as to whether the action is good or bad. If the consequences of my actions are negative, we could say it is bad. So to return to stealing. Stealing is bad because the consequences of it are bad. I may get caught and thrown in prison, depending on what I've stolen. Not much fun being in prison. But even if I don't get caught, I may live in anxiety for a while that I might get caught. Later on I might feel uneasy or guilty. Okay? Or I might get caught and not punished, but how embarrassed you feel when you're caught having stolen something. Even if you're not punished, you feel very bad. So, This is the second principle. I look at what will be the consequences of my behavior. And the third and most important principle for the defining of good and bad in Buddhism is what's called the universalizability principle. And this is a very simple principle, but very profound. I'm an individual, I'm a human being, and I'm sensitive to... You're Chinese, your skin color is different from mine. The shape of your eyes is different, okay? But ultimately, we're all human beings. And in another sense, there's not that much difference between us. If you steal something from me, something that I like, something that I love or treasure or I need, I will feel bad. And it is a very safe assumption that if I steal something from you, you'll feel bad. In other words, what I feel, you probably feel too. Likewise, if I slip over in the street, I skin my knee or something like that, and somebody comes up and lends me a hand, expresses sympathy towards me, brushes me off, asks if they can help, I probably feel good. It's nice to have somebody expressing some concern and care for you. Likewise, if I see somebody slip in the street or somebody having an accident or something, and I go up and express my sympathy, that'll probably make them feel good. Now, it may not happen, but chances are that we all respond fairly similarly to such things. And the universalizability principle is as simple as that. I take my feelings and universalize them. I apply to you what I apply to myself. I wouldn't like you to steal from me, so I won't steal from you. I would like you to love me, therefore I will love you, or respect you. Okay? And it's as simple as that. Okay? You have this put very clearly in the Buddha's teachings. As am I, so am others. As are others, so am I. Comparing oneself with others, harm none, nor have them harmed. You get exactly the same teachings in Confucianism. Act towards others the way you would have them to act towards you. It's very simple. Fortunately, it seems to be relatively natural that most human beings think in this way. Right? And this is called the universalizability principle. So using these three principles together, not one of them, but the three together, the instrumental principle, the consequential principle, and the universalizability principle, we can get a very good idea as how to behave. And our motto is, cease to do evil, learn to do good. So I try to stop doing things that harm me and others, things that lead me away from my goal, things that have a negative consequence, and I try to learn to do skillful things, kusalasa. So that's the first thing. The second thing is sacitta pariyodapanam, purify the mind. Now to get to this, back to this question about why we do things. Now there's a very particular and very strange human habit. It's called bathing. And it's not a universal human habit. You'll probably know that when Marco Polo came back from China in the 13th century, he told about China, a great civilization, a wonderful place. And he told the Europeans for the first time about a culture that they'd never heard of before. He did all sorts of wonderful and useful things. One of the most useful things he did was he introduced spaghetti into Italy. Now we associate spaghetti with the Italians, but of course it was Marco Polo who introduced noodles, which is what spaghetti is, from China. And he told about strange and bizarre customs which made people's eyes open with surprise. And one of the strangest customs that the Chinese had was they used to bathe every day. What? Now the Europeans were astonished because they only used to bathe once in a lifetime. You generally bathe just on your marriage day. That's true. Even in 1900, only 91 years ago, there was a tax on baths in the United States of $100. Now that was a huge amount of money in those days. Why? Baths were rare, people never used them. It was one of those quaint, unusual habits that was just starting to become popular. Most people never bathed. Some years ago I visited Tibet, and in fact, even prior to visiting there, I actually spent some time when I lived in India living with Tibetans. Tibetans are somewhat different from the ancient Europeans. Their main difference is the Tibetans never even bath once in their life. They never bathe at all. And I knew a friend who lived with Tibetans for a while. I said, how could you stand this? And he said, well, after the first 3 years, you don't get any dirtier. Oh, I suppose so. After the first 3 years, you just don't get any dirtier. But honestly, apart from these unusual habits of the past and of a few smaller areas in the world, most people bathe regularly. Okay? Why do we bathe regularly? If you're sweaty and sweating and smelling and that, you feel very nice when you've had a fresh bath, don't you? You feel comfortable. You actually feel clean. Okay? The other reason we bathe now is because of the advances in health education. We understand that an essential part of maintaining good bodily health is that it should be cleaned. Okay? We know that all parts of the body, the ear, the hair, and everything must be cleaned. One of my major preoccupations in life is teeth. And I have a terrible fear of dentists. It's my idea of hell is to spend eternity in a dentist's chair having your teeth drilled. That to me would be hell. And when I meet people and I talk to them, I often look at their teeth. I'm very conscious of my own teeth. And sometimes I look at people's teeth. Oh, it's shocking. Bits of bihun hanging from here. And their body is so clean. But their mouth is like a plate that somebody's just eaten off. Bits of food and... Okay. We, for the most part, we take great care of our body, internally and externally, because we know that it's essential for good health. And nobody wants to be sick. And the other reason why we bathe and we wash regularly is for the sake of, and this is important too, is for the sake of beauty. Cleanliness and health are very closely associated with beauty. Even if you have a plain face, or perhaps even an unattractive face, that plainness is enhanced by clean clothing and a pleasant smell or no smell, neatness of appearance. Okay? This is why we bathe regularly, for beauty, for health, and for comfort. Now the mind is very different from the body. The substance is different. But in a sense, they are similar. The mind can be ugly. It can definitely be dirty. And it can make us feel quite uncomfortable. Okay? There are certain thoughts that we call dirty thoughts. Now, I'm not quite sure what dirty thoughts are, but I've got a rough idea. Okay? And there are certainly things that we could call beautiful thoughts. And even if there is something that we couldn't call beautiful thoughts, there is certainly something that we could call a beautiful personality. And a personality is the sum total of a person's mental life. Okay? You can have a person who has quite an attractive physical appearance, but an extremely ugly personality. And the opposite is true. A person might be quite plain, quite ordinary, or even unattractive. But although we might notice that in the beginning, if they had a particularly attractive personality, very generous, generous in their praise for others, or yielding, flexible, kind, or considerate, before long we simply wouldn't notice their physical appearance. That wouldn't be paramount. If somebody said to us, what is that person like? We'd say, well, they're a really nice person. We wouldn't be referring to their face, we'd be referring to their personality. Okay? So, we purify the mind for exactly the same reasons. That is, we try to modify the thoughts and emotions and the habit patterns within the mind so they conform more to the idea of, so that it tends to make us feel comfortable, free from guilt, fear, anxiety, shame, to feel healthy in the sense that the mind functions properly. It's open and flexible. And beautiful in the sense that, if you like, all the positive emotions, metta, mudita, upekkha, karuna, love and compassion, kindness, thoughtfulness, abide in that mind. Okay? So, cease to do evil, learn to do good, purify the mind. And the last statement is, etang buddhana sasanam. All Buddhas teach this. That means all enlightened people agree that this is fundamental in life. Okay? Sabbapapassa akaranam, kussalassa upasampada, sachitta pariyodapanam, etang buddhana sasana. Now, if you look at this epitome of Buddhism, and you compare it to some of the other epitomes or mottos that we've had a look at, you notice straight away that there's a difference. The first difference is that the other two refer to God. Okay? This one does not refer to God. The second interesting difference is the other two are about what you could only call a belief. They are requesting or insisting that we believe in a certain thing. This one is urging us to act in a particular way, to behave in a particular way. That is, not to believe, but to act so as our actions are not evil, rather that they are good, and to actually do something with our mind, that is, purify it. And another interesting difference here is that you might say that those first two mottos, as soon as you heard them, you would understand that they apply only to particular individuals. That is, the first one would apply only to those within the Islamic tradition. The second one would apply only to those who can accept the Christian tradition. The third one, I would go as far as to say, if I left out the last line and I went to somebody of any religious tradition, or even to those of no religious tradition, so-called freethinkers or atheists, and I said, what do you think of this as a principle of life? Avoid evil, do good, and purify your mind. I guarantee that most of them, well, maybe a few free thinkers would say, my idea of life is have a good time, don't worry about others. But a thoughtful free thinker, and all free thinkers are supposed to be thoughtful, a thoughtful free thinker would probably say, well, that's my philosophy of life in a nutshell. A Christian would probably say, no arguments with that. Why, our sages, our saints have taught exactly that. A Muslim would say, oh, that's wonderful. Isn't that from the Quran? Okay. A Jew might say that, oh, that's from Hillel, or it's from the Talmud or something. They probably all agree to that. So, it seems to me that this is once again a fairly good example of the universality of Buddhism. Because Buddhism doesn't make many, what we might call theological statements, but tries to concentrate more on not what we should believe, but rather on how we should behave, you seem to have the best of all religious traditions in here without, as it were, insisting that people believe in certain things. You might even be able to tag this on to the others. Believe in this particular type of God and do evil, cease to do evil, learn to do good and purify the mind. So, in a very true sense, this very well epitomizes Buddhism, not only the behavior that we're encouraged to practice in Buddhism, but also the general universal spirit of Buddhism. The fact that all people can practice Dharma without even being a Buddhist. Now, if I belong to some other religious traditions, there are certain things that mark me as being distinct. I must conform to this particular creed. I believe in the one and only, holy, this, that, and the other. But what marks me out as a Buddhist is not that I believe in the Buddha, but rather that I sincerely try to cease to do evil, learn to do good, and purify the mind. Now this has to have an effect upon how I see others. If I meet somebody who is sincerely trying to avoid evil, to practice good, and in his or her own way purify the mind, I don't have to ask whether he's a Christian or a Buddhist or a Taoist or a Jain or a Jew or a Gentile. If he's practicing that, and I'm practicing that, don't we have much in common? Aren't we able to see eye to eye? Now, when I take this as my epitome, my understanding of the Dharma, and I meet somebody who is practicing that, they may call it Hinduism or whatever. I'm not really particularly what.
Things.
What are you doing with your body? What are you doing with your mind? Now, when I meet somebody of another religious tradition who is sincerely trying to purify their hearts, how could I waste my time trying to convert them? They're already practicing what I'm practicing. True, they may not call it Buddhism. And it's even true that they might be actually practicing it better than I do. Therefore, I am genuinely able to have a true and deep respect for those of other religious traditions. Not because I can tolerate them. Oh, I hate his religion, but I'll try to tolerate it. But because I really believe, as a Buddhist, I really believe that the essential thing in life is how you behave and what you do with your heart, not what you believe. Truly universal. So, next time somebody says to you, what is the teachings of the Buddha? What do you believe in as a Buddha, as a Buddhist? You can say to them, Sabapapasa akaranang, kusalasa upasampada, sachitta parayodapanang, etang buddhanusasanang. And they'll probably scratch their head and say, what? So perhaps not necessary to repeat it in Pali, but you could say in English, cease to do evil, learn to do good, purify the mind. This is the teaching of all Buddhas. Okay? Right, that's all I've got to say for this evening.
Beginning of death. Death is the beginning of birth. Between birth and death, suffering is more than happiness. Through Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum.
Birth is the beginning of death. Death is the beginning of birth. Between birth and death, suffering is more than happiness. Through Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum.
Where we can find true happiness and enlightenment. Thus one should observe and realize that all the world phenomena and ideas are unreal. Like a dream, like magic, like an image. All the world phenomena and ideas are impermanent. Like water bubbles, like blue and lightning. Om Mani Padme Hum, 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 Om Mani Padme Hum. Birth is the beginning of death. Death is the beginning of birth.
Between birth and death, suffering is more than happiness.
Through Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. Where we can find true happiness and enlightenment. Thus one should observe and realize that all the world phenomena and ideas are unreal. Like a dream, like magic, and like an image. All the world phenomena and ideas are impermanent. Like water bubbles, like dew Padme Hum. Om Mani 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 Padme Hum. Be one with Buddha, live by the Dharma, lift up your spirit, be one with Sangha, be like the dewdrop that slips into the great shining sea. Lift up your mind and be free. Let's all be one in the Lord. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Leave all your worries and your desires. Live for your brothers and for your neighbors. Be like the dewdrop that slips into the great shining sea. Let's all be one in the Lord. Love is the way of the Lord. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. What good is it to live in greed? It only yields hundredfold tears. Free your mind from misery. Love is the ultimate key. Let's all be one in the Lord. Love is the way of the Lord. True love is giving without remembering. Love is compassion with no distinctions. Love is the way of the Lord. Follow the path of the Lord. Lift up your mind and be must bring endless